Hello, everyone. I'm having a conversation with Serena on the newly formed Liberalist movement. Serena used to be progressive and now considers herself a liberalist, and we're going to talk about why that is. So, Serena, you could give me an idea of what do you believe? What's your ideology? What's your values?
Yeah, well, that's like a pretty big question,
I
but
know.
I suppose,
Threw it right on you.
yeah, like my sort of motivation for joining the Liberalists, I sort of found out about it through like Sargon of Akkad.
Hmm.
I think like a lot of people did, but I guess I was, definitely very disillusioned from the left and like what was happening there, and like I said, I didn't consider myself progressive any longer, and sort of for quite a while I wasn't really sure what I believed. Like I sort of thought, oh, maybe I'm more conservative now, but in some ways that also didn't suit like my temperament and my personality type. And then I guess the liberalist values are in some ways, the basic principles can be a bit vague,
Yeah.
but I do definitely like agree with them. I think they're like a good starting point. Like definitely freedom of speech is a big one. I've definitely seen the importance of that. And
Yeah, that seems to be like the big one right now. Like freedom of speech is the number one, and it's kind of a simple one. There's not much to it other than like, hey, we should be able to talk. And it's like I remember when I used to be part of like a libertarian chapter on my campus, Young Americans for Liberty, and like freedom of speech back then. This was like 3 years ago, but back then freedom of speech, it was like kind of an obvious. I don't know how to word it, but it was like, oh, like that's just a thing we had. That's one of the many different things you can support. And now, over the last like 2 years, it's like, wow, that's kind of the most important one. Like that's really risen in the ranks of priority.
yeah, definitely. And I think it's kind of like a tricky one because I feel like even a lot of people on the left who aren't that extreme would be like, oh yeah, I'm all for freedom of speech, but I don't think they don't show it in everything that they do, because they're sort of like, oh yeah, freedom of speech is a good thing. We don't want this Stalinism or Orwellian
Yeah.
lifestyle. But then it's like, oh no, but you can't make those jokes, or like you can't criticize these groups of people because they sort of, there's like a bit of definite hypocrisy there. And I think there's also there's danger of the echo chamber.
And I got to give it to like the liberalists in the group. I actually learned about the thing like 6 days late or I saw the video and I'm like, oh, I'll watch it later. And then 6 days later, it's like, wow, I missed a huge thing. But
Yeah.
but yeah, like just going through the Facebook page, it's actually or Facebook group. It's a problem. Like it's a weird finding the middle ground of how like, hey, the hardest thing about freedom of speech is that everyone is kind of like it's just a battleground there. Like it's people tossing out their ideas, and I can see why people just want to silence other people. It's like it makes it a lot easier for them to control others, and it's like, nope, we're going to take it the moral way and not the easy way.
Yeah, no, I see it, man. It's like a battleground of ideas, and that's the way it should be, is ultimately, even if it's not always very comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. And definitely, like, I guess another part of the reason that the liberalists sort of appealed to me, because it was very getting away from that kind of feeling politics,
Yeah.
which is, I don't know, it's just such a
It's just such a mess. But Yeah, so you were saying, I think I heard you say, like, when you were progressive, you weren't like a hardcore progressive. You were more of just, I don't know where I fit in, so this is good kind of
Yeah,
thing.
I wouldn't say I was ever like rabid way of putting it, but I was definitely like, I don't know, it's weird to think about. I was definitely quite feminist, and I think I did have a lot of like Marxist sympathies, and I was quite, I guess, anti-capitalist. So that maybe that is quite extreme, but I don't think I fully, yeah, that like fully, I didn't fully understand the sort of dangers of communism and how it was like connected to like Marxism, and even at the like ideological level, like how kind of dangerous it is and how closely connected it is to communism, and all those horrible things that happened in the 20th century and things that are still happening
Yeah.
with communism. So I sort of feel like that is partly my fault and partly also the education system as well, and the fact that I was never properly like challenged on that for ages definitely was very comfortable in my belief system and had a lot of people around me who were pretty similar. So
Yeah, it's interesting. I noticed how like it is kind of hard to come up with words for what you like labels for what you believe when you started out, like the actual term for,
yeah.
because we don't know the terms. Like I came out more conservative, but like my beliefs were just like, yeah, that's what they were. Like there wasn't much to them. There wasn't like a label for it. It was just yeah, that's just what you are, right? Like that's the starting point.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's true. I sort of started more as just being more critical of like what I once believed. I guess the idea is you're like skeptical, because
Yeah.
skeptics community, but you're not exactly. Okay, obviously, it's quite important to also be standing for something good. Like you can't just be against things.
Yeah, and it's really easy actually. Like there's the position that's not really, I don't want to say logic. Like there's the position that just sounds right, which is where I imagine you were with like feminism. Like feminism sounds good on the surface of it. Like anti-capitalism sounds good on the surface of it, and it's like
Yeah, yeah.
if that's where you start, it's like, yeah, that if you don't really dive into it, which I mean I don't blame people for not diving into it, because it's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort, it's a lot of infighting, but but yeah, it's, I think that shows a lot that yeah, so you started kind of where I did, but on the opposite side of, that's just where you are, and then once you look into it a little bit more, then you go down the whole rabbit trail of all kinds of other stuff.
Yeah, so you sort of started saying you were more conservative, or you had said libertarian.
Yeah, I had a conservative family, and my dad was more libertarian, but they weren't like ideological. They were just like kind of, this sounds good to me. Like
Yeah, they weren't that much into it.
they weren't like reading 80,000 different books, which I'm not just insulting them for that. It's just that's how I was raised. Like that's just how it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of how we all start out. But so is there like a defining moment for you then? Because I know with like Dave Rubin, there was that Sam Harris thing on Bill Maher. For certain people, there's like a defining moment, and then for other people, it's just the like, oh, over time you just kind of wake up to this stuff. But was there like a moment for you where that kind of just opened the gates and then everything happened?
Well, it is kind of hard to say. Like, I'd say it's kind of a combination. There was like a lot of, I'd say, defining moments along the way, and then a lot of sort of in between of like slowly changing, because it did kind of happen over, I don't know, maybe like roughly 5 or 6 months.
Yeah.
But I think I'll give like a couple of what I call the defining moments. Like one was, I got a lot of influence from my previous relationship, because a guy I was with was he supported like Donald Trump. This was like in the election period, and he didn't consider himself like a feminist. So it was like all these things that were very like conflicting to my comfortable belief system. So I guess I was like introduced to a lot of different views and opinions that were sort of puncturing my echo chamber in a way that I hadn't experienced before. And definitely one of the things he shared or wrote a post about was it was about like Islam and Saudi Arabia and like how women were treated there, and obviously horrible, like they don't really have any women's rights, and sure everyone in the Liberalist knows all about this anyway. But it was just sort of like, I guess I kind of knew about this stuff before, not something I thought about a lot, and it was just sort of showing the difference between like all the like modern kind of Western feminism that I was sort of like partly into, just doesn't talk about this stuff at all, like these really serious, like horrible problems. So I definitely like reading a lot into that, into like Islam and the treatment of women. So that was definitely like a wake up moment for me.
And then it just all kind of went from there, right?
Yeah, like it was like a few different things, like listening to different speakers, even like Milo Yiannopoulos. Like I listened to a lot of him at first, and I guess like I originally started listening to him because like I found him offensive, but
yeah.
It was
no surprise there.
It was kind of interesting because like while I kept having these like dreams about him. So he'd gotten definitely under my skin in some way. In my dreams, he appeared like this like golden child. Like I think in one he was like my English teacher. He was a really good English teacher, and I'm like, what's going on here? Like I keep having dreams about this kind of like far right, provocative person. So yeah, I kept listening to that, and then I kind of had to admit he did have some valid points, and yeah, led me on to other people, and I think also definitely like discovering Jordan Peterson and like listening to him and his experiences. That was also like quite a big wake up moment. I think a lot of things sort of came more into alignment then.
Yeah, and that's interesting. Milo Yiannopoulos. So was that like your first big person, I guess, you listened to?
Yeah, it was actually. I think it was from this previous relationship I had, because I think he just liked him on Facebook, and I was like, oh no, I'm like, who is this person? Like, how can they be saying all these things? But then it's like, it was so addictive as well, because I'm just like, I don't know, I'm not used to being like, I don't know, offended or so challenged in a way.
Yeah, that's a good sign, isn't it? That like it's one thing to just find a new idea and be like, okay, this is fine, and then there's what you should be doing, which you did, where there's like you find the new idea and then you struggle with it, and there's like the conflict back and forth. You're taking time to really digest it, and then it's like, oh, okay. And even then, like for people like Milo, it's like you might not even fully like side with him on most things, but then he might lead you to, like you said, Jordan Peterson or someone else, or like it leads you down the trail.
Yeah, I think definitely like from Milo Yiannopoulos did lead me to like the Factual Feminist and Christina Hoff Sommers. I don't know if you know of her.
Yeah, cool.
But yeah, then I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like it has some overlap with what like Milo says, but she has a very different style of presentation.
Yeah, she does.
A bit more bit more measured. So I'm like, oh, this is more easy for me to digest in a way, but it's still very different. A different perspective to an approach that I've heard and encountered before.
Yeah, and that's that's what I like. One of the things I find so interesting, which is why I'm trying to do these chats, is like it's one thing to talk about ideas, which is great, and I'll be doing plenty of that. But it's really interesting to hear like where people started from, because I don't think we talk about that enough. Like, where did you start? Like, what made you go down from here to here there? And it's actually like you'll find 10 different stops that people go down. Yeah. Because we're all kind of like, there's this group now that we're all kind of talking to, like all these people from like left wing to right wing are talking to each other, and then it's like, oh, I actually started here, and then I talked to someone that had one way of presenting, and I a little bit agreed with them, and then from then on I went to here and here and here. And it's like that's the best way to do it, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's like you probably shouldn't, change your views like super easily. Like, I don't think it is an easy process.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult, isn't it, to like not let go, but just to change perspective.
Yeah, I think definitely these political, like ideological beliefs, like they do go quite deep. Like there is a lot of, the surface stuff, but then, there's like the deeper side to it as well, which I think is a lot harder to shift and kind of like challenge, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like I know what you mean. You gotta ease into it a little bit, don't you? Which I actually started from or a bit of backstory. So I the weirdest thing for me was I started out like, it was actually with Skype. Is what we were talking about, having problems with Skype. The very first time I got a Skype account, like all my high school friends are like, hey, like get a Skype account. So I finally did. And everyone in this group was just like, all my friends were there, were talking, and for some reason the subject got to Ayn Rand. And they start bashing Ayn Rand. And now I've never read her before. Like, this was like freshman year of high school. Although I knew my dad did, and I knew my dad liked her. So I went to defend her, and it was like, I got nothing. Like, I got nothing. Because I never read her before. I know nothing about her other than that, like, this is the side I'm supposed to be on. And from then on, it was like, okay, maybe I should actually read her stuff. So to defend her. So I did, and it's like, I don't consider myself like a full-on objectivist or like that huge of a fan of her stuff. But it's like, from there, I went to, I think it was Ron Paul's camp, because this was like 2012 when he ran for president of the United States. And then it went from Ron Paul to like all these other libertarians and there, and like all the way down to like all the major libertarians. And then from then, what was it? From then, it was, I think, Stefan Molyneux, who used to dabble a lot more with libertarians. Then it was Dave Rubin, because Dave Rubin was on a show once. And then from there, like, you know how it goes. It's like, wow, you do like a whole route of down the line of just a whole journey of people.
It's like one person like leads into another, and then just like opens up. It is very interesting. Because I feel like definitely when I kind of woke up from the regressive ideals of the left and that sort of hypocrisy that was going on there, like I definitely felt quite isolated, like a lot of people seemed to, because it was sort of like this stuff was happening like slowly, like my sort of views changing, and I wasn't really talking like too much to anyone about it. I was very much keeping it to myself. And then when it all kind of like happened, I was like, I don't know if I can say these things without like fearing some kind of backlash. Like, I'm pretty sure a lot of the things I think now would be considered hate speech. Like by a lot of people, and like maybe even that was like a slight overreaction, but then there's, I think, also a validity to feeling and thinking that way as well.
There definitely is. That's interesting. So then it goes to my question for you: why the liberalists, because my big thing with like I'm still probably more ideologically closer to libertarians than I are with like classical liberals and that. But personally, I like the thing is, it's a weird kind of argument. It's not a moral argument. It's not against an ideology. It's an argument against the people of the ideology. And it's like libertarians, I think they have it right, but they can do nothing but fight all the time. Like if you think your group or like to anyone listening to it, if you think your ideological group has just infighting, it's nuts. But and then looking at the liberalist movement, it's like, okay, we're all like, there's classical liberals, there's libertarians, there's conservatives, there's like center left, left wing people, like actual liberals, and it's like, hey, we're all throwing our ideas back and forth, and definitely like a little bit of infighting, but it's a lot like we can at least we're all on the same page, which is nice.
Yeah, definitely. With at least the like free speech element and protecting individual rights, I think pretty good on the same page with that. Yeah, so I don't know if like why I chose the Liberalists. In a way, I guess it's not a very strong response, but I'm still kind of trying to figure it out myself, and like I think it's definitely like my preferred political party at the moment. Like I'd say, I know there's like the classical liberal. I'd probably say in some ways maybe a bit more of a social liberal. I don't know if that's the right term. Like I definitely strongly believe in the like self-determinism and like taking responsibility for yourself, and a difference between like rights and sort of privileges. So like you have a right that your speech is protected, a right to sort of like economic freedom, you have a right to be protected from harm, but not a right to necessarily free stuff or be provided for. But I don't know if there is like a system, like maybe it's a bit similar to like Saga Novakad and his beliefs, because I know he still considers himself to be or like left-wing or like left-leaning. I think obviously it's good if it can be realistically provided for, that there are some institutions or funds that do provide for people who genuinely can't like earn their own way, that people with disabilities, or some help for like homeless people, like nothing like lavish, but I guess basic things. But even that, I acknowledge it's in some way ideology, because I don't have like practical solutions for how it's achievable, I guess.
And that's something that like actually I think we should all keep in mind, that another reason that I'm kind of leaning more like I'm leaning more liberalist, like towards Sargon's group rather than where I came from, is like none of us know that much. Like there's a good libertarian argument for like, I mean, people barely know anything. Like how can they, like an individual or a group of individuals don't know enough to run society. Like that's the argument against like big government. We don't know enough. And then it's like, yeah, that applies like to everyone. That applies to when we're debating all these things. It's like in the end, we got to keep in the back of our minds that we most of us probably don't have the right answer, and I think all of us definitely don't have, or like the vast majority of us don't have the right answer on things, and it's like, yeah, that's fine.
yeah, that's
we're still figuring this out.
Yeah, definitely, and like I don't understand that much, I guess, about economics and a lot of things about politics. I think definitely like united on the fact that we're gonna abolish like hate speech laws and against things that are very much like obviously regressive, and
like there are things we can start with that we can all get behind, like
there's good
hate speech laws.
Start.
Yeah,
I guess it's like uniting on these things, and I think definitely keeping very closely to a sort of a scientific and like factual framework, like looking at what can be proven, and because with a lot of the identity politics argument and trying to push like sort of policy and all of that, like I'm at university, I'm doing like a Bachelor of Psychology, and definitely see, like, I think obviously that's like universities are a good place to target, at least for even just sharing alternative viewpoints. And I think definitely sort of fighting against a lot of like what's coming out of the social sciences, because a lot of that is, it's all like ideology and identity politics and just the lived experience, and it's moving away so much from what can actually be proven, and taking a more objective and scientific look at all of these things rather than just feeling and narrative and lived experience.
Actually, that or you mentioned economics too, and it's like I read a lot of economics from like the Austrian perspective, and I don't blame people for not reading it because it's boring. It's really, really boring. But but that makes like it's something to think about. That like we don't have people getting degrees, and like there is no, or I guess there's political science, but there is no degree of like economics and psychology and political science. Like there's specialties kind of thing, and like as we've seen with Jordan Peterson, who kind of takes like the psychology approach to things. It's like there's so many different approaches to things, and I think like the libertarians tend to take a lot more of the economic approach, which is like obviously like, you can't really do much with that. You can't do much in terms of organizing society without an understanding of economics. And then it comes to like Jordan Peterson's human psychology thing, where it's like, okay, you can't really organize a society of human beings if you don't understand how human beings work. And there's the like political science end of it's like you can't really actually get some stuff done, or you can't achieve political change without understanding how politics works. And it's like that's too much. There's three different angles right there.
Definitely it's tricky, and like I'm pretty big fan of Jordan Peterson, and I definitely agree with his kind of philosophy or what he promotes of that, like you work on yourself like as an individual, and kind of like what he says is like if you want to change the world, you'll start by changing yourself in a way. So I do definitely agree with that aspect of it, that I guess for a sort of ultimately well-functioning society does also need to include a lot of people like working on themselves. Like I guess that is partly the self-reliance aspect.
It's definitely a harder a harder solution, because that's not the right word for it, but I'm thinking like because I've been going through his new book, and it's like he does make a good point like that you just made, that it's like working on yourself is where you start, because that's the one thing you can control. And it's like there are a lot of people, which I mean, I'm not excluding myself from this as much, but there's a lot of people where it's like it's a lot easier to complain online than it is to actually change where you can change.
Yeah, definitely. And there's definitely that temptation to want to like change other people or kind of organize them, and also quite easy to criticize others, which not saying that obviously you should be critical of others, but saying like, these are all the ways that you're wrong, and you should change and be a better person and notice your potential. But more like definitely people should also focus on like sorting themselves out as best they can. Like I
exactly,
I do agree with that.
Okay, there was one thing I did want to mention that, like, you actually, I was a whole day off because I can't. I keep forgetting it's the 21st in the morning where you are, and it's still the 20th in the evening for me. So I had this a whole day off. But you were you the one that organized it? There was a Liberalist event in Melbourne.
Oh yeah. I didn't organize it. It was this other guy, Josh. I was just like re-advertising that
Right.
it was happening, just in case there was like a few, people on the page from Melbourne who were like interested and hadn't heard about it. But yeah, so that was on last night. And that was good. I think there was about 10 or 11 people there, and
See,
it was more
that's good
just
for like for people that like have never gotten a group together. Like for a group that's just started, early January, and is still
true.
pretty small, and like 10 people to show up at an event in one city, like a geographical location. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I think so. Like everyone seemed really, really keen. So I feel like there's definitely a lot of energy behind and within this movement. I think there's a lot of people kind of concerned about the state of the world and what's happening at the moment. So people seem pretty keen for like action, I guess, and just talking and like sharing ideas. And it's a very like young movement as well. Like there was sort of mixed ages, but there was some guys who came to this meeting and they were like still in high school, which is quite interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. Like and like you said, like there's 10 people there that want to like get stuff done, kind of way. Like they're all ready to get stuff done, and that's what we need here. We need people that are out organizing events and stuff and getting stuff done and getting actual on the ground events, which seems to be like the trend, not the trend, or the purpose of the Liberalist movement, because it's the internet is a very large place that has a big impact. Like then there's the next step of getting into the real world and actually meeting up and talking to people, and like and networking.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a free speech rally on Saturday in Melbourne, which I'm planning on going to. So that's pretty good. And there's like a few other events coming up. Like there's the Jordan Peterson talk and something else after that. I can't remember. So.
But what we will do is we'll put all these in like the description of the video or in the comments or somewhere, because if it's up by or if the events haven't already passed. But what we'll do is we'll link all of those for the people in Melbourne, because there's apparently a lot of Liberalists in Melbourne. That's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely a reasonable amount, I'd say. Like it's definitely like a left-wing city overall. Yeah. Still a lot of Liberalists, and I think also because it's quite a big city, there's a lot of things happening, various kinds of protests on all sides of the political spectrum. So
are there a lot of like I'm from rural area, like there's nothing I'm technically in a city, but only because it includes other towns as part of it. It's like it's very rural, so we don't have protests. We don't have, even my university, like when there's protests, it's 10 people with 2 posters and that's it. So so tell me about that, actually. Like what's been going on in Melbourne then?
Well, I'm actually a bit out of the loop with it. Like I haven't really been going to too many events, but I was thinking just more of what other members last night were saying. Like quite a few of them went to when Milo came to Australia. They went to that event, and there was like a huge counter protest, and
wow,
just like usual, like Antifa were there, and they were being called like Nazis and racist, and it was sort of getting quite violent. And don't think I know there's been like like Josh who organised the Liberalist meetup. He's gone to a few other like protests and tried to talk to like both sides, like the more socialist, communist side, and also tried engaging with like the alt-right as well, which I thought was interesting. Like I haven't done that as much, but yeah, I'm definitely interested in attending a few more protests and rallies and speaking events, because that's mainly like just watched it online. Like you're probably the same, like watch these rallies and protests, and seeing the crazy polarization, and also like some reasonable people as well. But I haven't had much like real life experience with it, I guess.
Yeah.
Like some of the other people there last night had.
Yeah, I've never had, like, I don't go to much other events. I've hosted a few, but I planned a few back when I was part of the Young Americans for Liberty, but we never had protesters, and that was disappointing. When just this, what was it, last year, I handed it off to a new guy who's doing really great with it, and they had a speaker, and the best we got in terms of protesters, where we got like, I guess 10 people to stand up and walk out mid-speech. It's like, that's not good publicity.
Yeah, you need to be more provocative.
I know,
get more attention.
So then, thinking of the Liberalist group, then that makes me think, you brought up the alt-right. So then my next question is like, why not the alt-right? Why not like, I guess just the alt-right, conservatives, libertarians? Why not drift far to the right? Why stay left?
Well, essentially, I somewhat understand people who become really alienated by the left and sort of go a bit too far towards the alt-right. I don't think I was ever like that drawn to it. Like, I don't think the alt-right like have any good arguments. Essentially, I think the reason that some people have a bit more sympathy for them, or kind of, I don't know, identify with them a bit more, maybe just because they do receive so much hate. And if, someone who's challenged the left has also received that kind of hate, they might in some ways have sympathy or identify a bit with the alt-right. Yeah, I guess for me, I was never like went that far or was drawn to it. I think for a while, like I didn't think the alt-right existed, if that makes sense, because I knew.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, people were being like accused of being alt-right, like by the mainstream media and all these people. And so in some ways I'm like, oh, this is just like some made-up term used to slander, people that they don't agree with, kind of thing. But then obviously like Richard Spencer and his followers, and there are a few other main speakers as well who do advocate for this white ethno-state. Like obviously, these kind of super racist people, they do exist. It's quite a small minority, but
it's weird when the alt-right term. It's very like, it's hard to pinpoint because it's not really a concrete movement, and it keeps the definition keeps changing. Because I was in your camp for when their names first started popping up, like, oh, these people don't actually exist. And that's what it started out as, like the term alternative right. And if you watch some older videos, like some videos of certain like political people from like 2 years ago, a lot of them consider themselves part of the alt-right back then that definitely would not be now, because it seems the term like literally meant alternative right, like you weren't establishment. And then it seems that as time went on, the movement just kind of like everyone that wasn't like advocating for some sort of ethno-state just got out of it. And good for them.
Yeah, because they were like, this is yeah, want to willingly associate ourselves with this anymore. I suppose the only thing I'd say that was like my most extreme thing I kind of followed or like looked into, and I wouldn't even say I ever fully agreed with it, because I used to read it's a bit embarrassing, like the red pill on Reddit, which is it's kind of it's sort of a bit of a similar strain to like MGTOW.
Oh, okay.
But it's all about that that like game and stuff. That
Oh, I see. Like, yeah, I don't know
like,
too.
Young
I don't
men to,
know
like,
much about this at
implement.
all. So that's
Right.
yeah, you
Yeah,
probably know more about this than me.
it's a pretty like niche thing, so I don't think anyone would know too much about it, and I don't think it's really taken, seriously at all. But it's sort of like the idea of like a kind of a way to, I guess, help young men like pick up women.
Oh, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, sort of that, and a bit of like a masculine framework and more like traditional gender roles, and like society has abandoned men in a way, so now we have this like our own little movement. And yeah, I think I was just, I don't know, I think I was just addicted to like reading it for a while, even though I don't think I agreed with it morally. I think it was just that because I moved from the being on the left and sort of thinking like, oh, there's like no differences between men and women kind of thing, to sort
Right.
of realizing, oh, there is some like biological differences between men and women, like we're not exactly the same. So I think I saw this little like red pill sub as like a kind of reaction to that,
Right. It's
because yeah, the sort of relations between the genders have gotten so confused, they'd kind of gone the other way and been like, no, men and women are so different.
yeah.
And
Then
also like women are shit.
yeah, there's there's always the spectrum of like, just because you have the one side that's wrong, like the far left, and then you have the reaction to it, which like the liberalists, the center, and then you have the people that are like, okay, if this is wrong, then we have to go the complete opposite direction.
Yeah,
Which
yeah,
I don't know if that's what the red pill is, if it's like right or if it's all the way over there. I'm not sure. I don't want to like characterize it because I have no idea what it is, but or not that much about it. But
yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
there's
Like I think I saw it more like it wasn't overly political, but I definitely saw it. There obviously did seem to be some need, like in society, for like a kind of masculine role models, and that, I don't know, sort of framework. Like there was obviously like young men who were, yeah, I guess, I don't know, it's like looking for a way where they can be, express their masculinity in a way. Because I know like Emily, the view of feminism, like even if a lot of feminists
yeah,
deny this, is that masculinity is just a toxic, and it's kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater
Right.
in a way. Like sure, there are toxic elements, but you also need a benevolent masculine, I guess, to aspire to. You can't just be like, no, you can't be a man at all. Yeah.
yeah. That's the like. I know what you mean, because there is like, I know quite a few people actually, like a lot of my old high school friends, that it's like masculinity is like the jerk style, like it's the definition of it is isn't, or it's not defined very well, because like you have you have the people that are arrogant to the point where they're just jerks, and then it's like, okay, now we have to get rid of everything even closely related to it, and it's like, nope, no, we can keep parts of it, but We can keep the good kind of masculinity.
Yeah, definitely. And there is like I don't know if it's like a double standard or more of a hypocrisy in that like women have something to answer to in this as well. It's like nobody talks about like toxic femininity,
right?
Or like the fact that even these more like say like typically douchey qualities of masculinity, like being really arrogant and a bit intimidating and kind of dominant. Like actually, like a lot of women are attracted to that, and it's like, well, what about like that aspect of it?
Yeah.
Like I would say, I don't think that's a good thing overall, but that was what this kind of sub was saying, that like, like a lot of women are like attracted to that kind of, I guess like arrogant masculinity. So their idea was like, oh, we're gonna abuse this, rather than trying to be good people overall and work on our sort of confidence and assertiveness.
Yeah.
We're gonna sort of use that, I don't know, like asshole effect. So I'm like, I don't fully agree, but I feel like they are raising a point that a lot of people don't seem to talk about as much.
Yeah, like you do make a good point. I agree, and it is a fine line to it. Like we can't have it where it's like, oh, let's just take anything even related to it and just toss it out. It's like, no, there's a fine line to it.
Yeah, definitely, it's interesting. I do find that conversation like very interesting. The sort of the like differences, I guess, between men and women. Like I don't think they're like massive, but there obviously is some difference there, and I think we do have like slightly different approaches to relationship and
well, yeah, it's like the nice thing about like what you're doing is you're diving into all these groups like that and just observing them and like taking or trying to like learn as much as you can from them, and it's like there's a lot of middle ground. Like I'm trying not to be like the radical centrist thing where everyone's a little bit right, because no, there are obviously like as far as I can tell at this point, communism is the only ideology.
Fascism.
Oh yeah, and fascism. Like
yeah, we're just kind of like the other side of the coin. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like when it comes to like or the discussion we're having like that everyone's having like this. It seems that there's people that want to kind of like nothing isn't, or there are absolutes to it, but there are always certain exceptions. I'm trying to think of a good way of explaining like is versus. That's what I'm going for. Like the is versus ought thing of where you have like when we're talking about gender differences, it's like there is the is of yes, there are gender differences. And then there's the ought, which I think people take too far of like they come of therefore this is the way we should act kind of thing. And it's like when the thing that like pushes me away from it, like that the alt-right kind of has a point, but I'm not I'm not going to jump in with them. But it's like the whole traditionalism versus like what the far left is doing of just the complete opposite of that, where everything's like completely subjective. It's like you're going to see, like due to biological differences, you're going to see certain trends, and it's like that's just the way things are. If you want to act differently, that's fine, as long as you're not hurting anyone. If you want to be different from the norm, that's fine, but like the norm is also okay too, and you're going to see trends in that direction.
Yeah, definitely. I see what you mean, and like even though I think feminism sort of says like, oh, it's all about women's choices and like you can choose whatever you want, like you won't be shamed for wanting to be like a stay-at-home mom if you're a woman because it's your choice. But I feel like in reality it does come out a lot different, and I think a lot of that, like you must be a career woman, and obviously looking at like how they present the gender pay gap as well.
Yeah.
It must be due to sexism. It's not women's choices, and like kind of pushing for men to be more like equal or even take more care of the children. And it's like, obviously, if a couple wants to have that dynamic, like have the husband stay, be a stay-at-home dad, and the woman goes out and, is the breadwinner, there's no reason they can't work out that dynamic, but on average, it doesn't happen that way. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's the best way. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. It's like with being a stay-at-home mom, it's like you're going to have trends in that direction because that's biologically like easiest, I should say. Like that's just the norm. It's like if you want to be a stay-at-home mom, it's like okay, like good for you. That's fine. Like is perfectly fine being that way. If you want to, like you just said, have things switched around, it's like that's fine too. You can do it, like that's perfectly okay. But you're going to have trends. You're going to have consequences. It's like you're going to have trends in a certain direction. You're not going to have everything be entirely equal. So it's like, yeah, the fact is like the stay-at-home mom tends to be an easier way with the father going out and working rather than the other way around. That tends to be the way things, like that tends to be the choices people make, so that's fine. But if you want to do it the other way around, it's like that's fine too. And that's where the far left seems to think it's like you're not allowed to be a stay-at-home mom, and then the far right is like you have to stay at home.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's like you as long as you work things out, it's like you can do whatever. As long as you accept the situation as is. Like whatever works.
And I think definitely, obviously, if there is instances where there is genuine discrimination, like if you are being discriminated in the workplace purely for being a woman, and that you can prove that, then like obviously that should be condemned. Like Ben Shapiro like reiterates this point a lot when it comes to like in this idea of institutional racism. He's sort of like, you can't just say there's institutional racism or there's this bias here. I need the actual accounts of when this racism has happened or when sexism has happened, and of course I'll be on your side with these kinds of fights, but you need to have specific instances, not just, oh, it's definitely out there, I'm definitely being held back, just trust me kind of thing. It's like proof, evidence, all of this.
All right, so we'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much, Serena, for joining me in this chat. What I'll do is I'll leave a link in the description to anything we mentioned, like the Liberalist page, any other groups like it. Just check the description. You'll see it. All right. Thank you, Serena, one more time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.